My name is Leah Carter. I'm 24 years old. You should learn something practical, my father said while signing the document that erased my future. Not quietly. Not privately. He said it at the kitchen table, right in front of my brother, while transferring $175,000 that had my name on it into an account that didn't. Money my grandparents had been saving for me since the day I was born. Money meant for college. Money that was supposed to be the one thing in my life that was equal. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't flip the chair or throw the plate I was holding or ask him how a father could look his daughter in the eye while stealing from her. I just stood there with my hands resting on the back of the chair, listening to the quiet scratch of his pen finishing the signature. Then I said one word. Okay. And 2 days later I walked out of that house with $312, a backpack, and no plan except never depending on him again. That was 5 years ago. Last month, my father walked into my office on the 18th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. My brother was behind him. My mother was a step behind them both, gripping her purse like she might drop it. But the moment they saw my name on the door, Carter Design Group, my mother's knees buckled slightly. Not because of the office. Not because of the view of Elliott Bay. Not even because of the 40 employees working on that floor. It was because of the way I looked at them. The same way you look at strangers who accidentally wander into the wrong room. No anger. No warmth. Just distance. But to understand what happened in that office that afternoon, you have to understand what happened 5 years earlier at a kitchen table in a quiet suburb outside Tacoma, Washington. And the one thing my father never knew existed. If you've ever been the person your family underestimated, the one they quietly decided didn't have potential, then this story might hit a little close to home. Before we go further, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories so you don't miss the next story. A lot of people watching right now are dealing with something similar, and these stories have a way of reminding you that the ending isn't always what people expect. Now let me take you back. I grew up in a 2-story craftsman house on Willow Ridge Drive in Lakewood, a quiet neighborhood where every lawn looked identical and every mailbox was freshly painted every spring. Appearances mattered in the Carter household. From the outside we looked like a catalog family. Inside the house, things ran differently. My father, Daniel Carter, was a logistics manager for a regional shipping company in Tacoma. He left every morning at 6:30 sharp in the same Navy sedan and returned every evening at 6:15. Dinner was at 6:45. News at 7:30. Lights out by 10. Structure, discipline, order. Those were the rules. Not written down. But everyone followed them. My mother, Karen Carter, hadn't had a job since my brother was born. She handled the house. The laundry. The meals. The quiet emotional balancing act of living with a man who believed leadership meant never being questioned. And then there was my brother. Ryan Carter. 3 years older. 6 inches taller. And, according to my father, destined for something big. Ryan got the new laptop every fall. Ryan got driven to weekend basketball tournaments across 3 states. Ryan got the downstairs bedroom with the private bathroom when we remodeled. When I turned 13, I was moved into the converted storage room above the garage. Dad said Ryan needed quiet space to study. I didn't argue. I learned early that arguing with my father was like trying to redirect a freight train with your hands. It wasn't going to stop. So you stepped aside. I spent most of my time drawing. Not sketches like kids doodle in notebooks. Real drawings. Buildings. Rooms. Interior layouts. Furniture concepts. Spaces. My art teacher in high school, Mr. Delgado, once stayed after class for 20 minutes looking through my sketchbook. You have spatial intuition, he told me. The kind architecture firms recruit for. He helped me put together a portfolio. He even wrote me a recommendation letter for a summer design program at Parsons School of Design in New York. I brought it home one evening, nervous but excited. My father glanced at the letter for about 5 seconds. Then he slid it back across the table. "Drawing rooms isn't a career, Leah," he said. "It's a hobby." That was the end of that conversation. But there was one thing that was supposed to level the playing field. The college funds. My grandparents, my mom's parents, had set up 2 accounts the year Ryan and I were born. One for each of us. Over 18 years they had deposited birthday checks, holiday money, and steady contributions. By the time I was 16, both accounts had grown to $175,000. My father announced it one Thanksgiving like he was delivering quarterly earnings. "Both my kids are set," he said proudly. "Full college paid for. $175,000 each." The table applauded. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. I remember sitting there thinking something very simple. For the first time in my life, something about Ryan and me was actually equal. I was wrong. If there was one person in my family who ever made me feel like I mattered, it was my grandmother. Leah Carter. She had run a small upholstery business out of her garage for almost 30 years. She fixed antique chairs, restored sofas, rebuilt furniture frames. And she loved the fact that I drew. Whenever I visited, she'd hand me a pencil and a sheet of butcher paper and say the same thing. "Show me what the room looks like in your head." While she stapled fabric or sanded wood, I would sit at her workbench sketching layouts. "You've got good eyes," she used to say. "Hands and a brain that can build things." Then she'd tap my sketchbook. "Those 2 things, nobody can take from you." She died when I was 17. Pancreatic cancer. Fast. Brutal. My father didn't attend the funeral. He said he had a conference call he couldn't miss. Ryan skipped it too. He had a fraternity event that weekend. I stood next to my mother at the service, holding her arm while she cried. A week before my grandmother died, she pulled me close in her hospital room. Her voice was weak, but her grip on my wrist was surprisingly strong. "I set something aside for you," she whispered. "Not much, but it's yours." She told me a name. Michael Harrington. And a phone number. "A lawyer," she said. "He'll find you when the time is right." I assumed she meant jewelry. Or maybe one of her old sewing machines. I folded the piece of paper and tucked it behind my school ID in my wallet. And for 2 years, I forgot about it completely. Until the morning my father decided my future belonged to someone else. They waited a week to tell me. Not because they were reconsidering. My father didn't reconsider decisions. He finalized them. The delay was paperwork. Transfers. Bank confirmations. All the quiet administrative steps required when you move $175,000 from one account to another and hope nobody asks questions. It was a Sunday morning in early March. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toasted sourdough, and the gray Washington sunlight came through the window above the sink in that soft, flat way that makes everything feel strangely calm. My father sat at the head of the table with a folder in front of him. Ryan leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone with one ankle resting on his knee. My mother stood by the counter drawing a plate. "Sit down, Leah," my father said. His voice carried the same tone he used when he was explaining something obvious to a coworker. I sat. He didn't ease into it. "Your brother has been accepted into an MBA program at Columbia," he said. Ryan finally looked up from his phone, wearing a small smile like someone waiting for applause. "Top program," he added casually. My father nodded. "It's a serious opportunity." He opened the folder and slid a sheet of paper toward me. "I've made a decision about the education accounts." I looked at the paper. It was a transfer authorization form. "I'm consolidating both funds under Ryan's name so he can complete the program and launch his consulting firm afterward." The words floated in the air for a moment like they hadn't quite decided where to land yet. Both funds. 2 accounts. $350,000. But the only part my brain kept repeating was one number. 175,000. Mine. Ryan has real potential, my father continued calmly, folding his hands together on the table. You, on the other hand, should consider learning a trade. Ryan smirked slightly. Not cruelly. Just the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no. There's good money in skilled trades, my father went on. Interior decorating, maybe. Something practical. Nothing wrong with that. I turned toward the sink. Mom? My mother didn't look at me. She kept drying the same plate. Her shoulders were tight. Silent. Your mother agrees, my father said. Something in my chest went very still. The refrigerator hummed. Ryan sipped his coffee. And my mother kept staring at the tile counter like it held the answer to a question she didn't want to hear. I realized something in that moment. It wasn't the money. Not really. Money can be replaced. What was happening in that kitchen was something else. They had already decided who mattered more. And they had decided it together. I looked back at my father. Then at Ryan. Then at my mother's back. And I said the only thing that came to mind. Okay. Ryan blinked. My father frowned slightly, like he had expected resistance. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Then I walked upstairs. No yelling. No crying. No dramatic speech. Just quiet footsteps up the staircase. Because something had become very clear to me. Nothing I said in that house would matter. I didn't leave right away. People imagine that moment like a movie scene. The angry daughter storming out. Doors slamming. Car tires screeching. But real life is slower than that. Real life is math. I had 2 final exams that week. If I left before finishing high school, I wouldn't graduate. Without a diploma, even community college admissions would be difficult. So I waited. Monday morning I took my AP English exam. I finished it in 40 minutes. Tuesday afternoon was AP Art History. The easiest 3 hours of my life. On Wednesday I walked across the gymnasium stage wearing a navy graduation gown. The principal shook my hand. Someone handed me my diploma. Families clapped from the bleachers. Mothers holding bouquets. Fathers holding cameras. My row in the seating area had 2 empty chairs. Reserved for Daniel and Karen Carter. They weren't there. They were across the state visiting Ryan's campus for a networking event he insisted was important. Ryan hadn't actually graduated yet. But my parents didn't know that. I walked out of the gym into the June sunshine and called an Uber. I didn't go home. I had already packed the night before. 1 backpack. 3 changes of clothes. My laptop. A phone charger. My sketchbook. And my grandmother's small wooden upholstery kit. Inside it were fabric needles, a measuring tape, and a few worn tools she had used for years. At the bottom of the box was the folded paper I hadn't thought about in 2 years. Michael Harrington. Lawyer. Phone number. My savings account held $312. That was my entire financial position. I left a note on the kitchen table. The same oak table where my father had signed away my future. It said, "I'm leaving. Please don't look for me. You already made your choice." The Uber driver didn't ask questions. He just drove. The house on Willow Ridge Drive disappeared in the rearview mirror. White siding. Freshly painted mailbox. Perfect lawn. And a front door I would not walk through again. Seattle in June is loud and alive and completely uninterested in your personal problems. Which was perfect. I found a room on Capitol Hill in a 3-bedroom apartment listed online. Rent was $650 a month. Shared bathroom. 2 roommates I had never met. One was a nursing student named Sophie who worked overnight shifts at Harborview. The other was a bartender named Louise who slept most mornings and played guitar in the living room at night. Neither of them asked why I was there. They didn't ask about my family. They just showed me the spare room and said rent was due on the 1st. I liked them immediately for that. Within a week I found a job at a coffee shop on Pike Street. Minimum wage plus tips. Long shifts. Burned fingers. The smell of espresso embedded permanently in my clothes. But it paid enough to survive. In the fall I enrolled at Seattle Central College in their interior design program. Community college tuition was barely manageable. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. My father called 2 weeks after I left. I didn't answer. His voicemail was short. "You're being dramatic, Leah. Come home and we'll look at vocational programs." 3 more messages came that month. Each one angrier than the last. My mother called once. Late at night. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sweetheart, your father just wants what's best." I stared at the wall while she spoke. "He gave away my college fund," I said. Silence. Then she said the sentence I think about even now. "Your father knows how to make the right decisions." That was the moment I deleted home from my contacts. Ryan didn't call. He didn't need to. Instead, he posted on Instagram. A rooftop bar in Manhattan. Bottle service. A caption that read, "MBA Life. Invest in the future." I closed the app and went back to studying. 3 months later I was sitting on my narrow bed in that Capitol Hill apartment digging through my backpack for a pen. My fingers brushed against the wooden box. My grandmother's upholstery kit. I opened it slowly. The measuring tape. The needles. And underneath them, the folded piece of paper. Michael Harrington. Lawyer. Phone number. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked at my bank balance. $184. Tuition payment due in 5 weeks. For the first time since leaving home, I wondered if my grandmother had meant something else. Something more than tools. The next morning, I dialed the number. Michael Harrington answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was calm in the way voices become calm after decades of dealing with other people's problems. Law offices of Harrington and Cole. For a moment I almost hung up. I had spent 2 years carrying that phone number in my wallet like a souvenir from a different life. Something sentimental, not something real. But my bank account said otherwise. "My name is Leah Carter," I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then the sound of a chair shifting. "Leah," he said slowly. "I've been wondering when you would call." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I've sent letters to the Carter residence 3 times over the last 2 years." My stomach tightened. "I never got them." Silence settled between us for a second. Then he said quietly, "I see." We both knew what that meant. My father had intercepted them. "Can you come into my office this week?" Harrington asked. "Preferably in person." I told him I could. The office was in Tacoma, about 40 minutes south of Seattle. 2 buses and a long walk later, I found the building. Old brick. 3 floors. The kind of quiet law office where the carpets are thick and the bookshelves are heavier than the desks. Michael Harrington was in his early 60s. Silver hair. Thin wireframe glasses. The type of man who didn't waste words. He gestured for me to sit down. "I worked with your grandmother for several years," he said. "She was a very determined woman." That sounded exactly like her. He opened a file folder. Inside were several documents. "Your grandmother established a revocable trust 4 years before she passed away," he explained. The trust contained $15,000. money she had slowly saved from her upholstery business. The beneficiary was listed as Leah Margaret Carter. Me. She instructed that the funds be transferred to you when you turned 18 and made contact with my office. He slid a check across the desk. $15,000. I stared at it. Not because of the money. Because someone had believed in me enough to plan ahead. My grandmother had sat in this exact office and decided to set something aside for me. Not for Ryan. Not for the family. Just for me. For the first time since leaving home, I felt my throat tighten. Your grandmother said you might need a head start, Harrington continued gently. She also asked me to make sure you understood something. What? He smiled faintly. She said you build things. And builders should always have tools. I nodded slowly. Then Harrington flipped another page in the folder. There's something else we should discuss. He turned the document toward me. It was a printed email. The sender line read, Daniel Carter. The date was the same week I graduated high school. Subject line, transfer authorization. My eyes moved down the page. 4 sentences. That was all it took to erase my future. My father had instructed the bank to transfer $175,000 from my custodial UTMA account into a new account under Ryan's name. No explanation. No mention of me. Just an account number and an instruction. Under Washington law, Harrington said, a UTMA custodian has a fiduciary responsibility to use the funds solely for the benefit of the minor. That minor was you. I looked up. So what does that mean? It means your father may have committed a breach of fiduciary duty. I stared at the paper again. You're saying I could sue him? Harrington nodded. You could pursue legal recovery of the funds. How long would that take? Possibly years. And how much would it cost? Litigation can be expensive. I leaned back in the chair. The office felt very quiet. My father's email sat on the desk like evidence. Cold. Precise. Transactional. Ryan's future. My account. My father had written it like he was transferring office supplies. After a long moment, I folded the paper. Then I placed it back on the desk. I'm not going to sue him, I said. Harrington raised one eyebrow slightly. May I ask why? Because I don't want his money anymore. The words surprised me a little when I said them out loud. But they were true. I didn't want the $175,000 if it came attached to him. I want my own. Harrington studied me for a second. Then he nodded. The statute of limitations is 6 years, he said. If you ever change your mind, the option remains. I took the check, the trust documents, and the copy of my father's email. Outside it had started raining. Tacoma rain. Thin. Steady. The kind that soaks through your jacket before you realize it. I stood at the bus stop holding a manila envelope against my chest. $15,000 wasn't life-changing money. In Seattle it barely covered 6 months of rent. But it was something else. It was proof that someone had seen me. The next 2 years were not glamorous. I want to be honest about that. People imagine success stories like movie montages. Music swelling. Fast cuts. Everything moving upward. Real life looks different. Real life looks like exhaustion. I used the money carefully. Tuition at Seattle Central cost about $4,200 for the year. I bought a refurbished computer and a used drafting tablet. The rest went into rent, bus passes, groceries, and emergencies. I worked at the coffee shop mornings and evenings. Classes during the day. Sketching projects at night. Some weeks I slept 4 hours a night. Sometimes less. But I graduated from Seattle Central with a 3.9 GPA. Top of the interior design program. That earned me a transfer scholarship to the University of Washington. Not a full ride, but enough to cover most of the tuition. I filled the gap with freelance design work online. Small projects. Logo layouts. Basic room renderings. $10 an hour if I was lucky. Then during my first semester at UW, something happened that changed everything. I walked into an internship interview at a small architecture studio in downtown Seattle. The creative director's name was Hannah Brooks. She was in her early 40s. Sharp. Direct. The kind of person who didn't bother with small talk. She flipped through my portfolio slowly. 10 pages. Then 20. Then 30. Finally she looked up. "Who trained you?" "My grandmother," I said. "And you too." The corner of her mouth twitched slightly. "You've got raw spatial instincts," she said. "You just don't know it yet." She closed the portfolio. "I can use that." She offered me the internship on the spot. 20 hours a week. $15 an hour. Starting Monday. I accepted before she finished the sentence. And somewhere across the country, my brother Ryan, funded by my $175,000, was beginning a very different version of success. I stopped checking Ryan's social media about 6 months after I left home. Not because I stopped being curious. Because curiosity started costing me sleep. But information has a way of traveling anyway. My roommate Sophie followed someone who knew Ryan from college. Stories filtered through the way gossip always does. Ryan had completed his first year at Columbia's MBA program. But instead of finishing, he had pivoted. That was the word he used online. Pivoted. Apparently the MBA wasn't necessary anymore because he had decided to launch a startup. Something in digital strategy consulting. Which, as far as anyone could tell, meant renting a hot desk at a co-working space in Manhattan and writing LinkedIn posts about leadership. He leased a BMW 4 Series. He rented an apartment in Murray Hill. Photos started appearing on Instagram. Rooftop bars. Expensive dinners. Bottle service. The captions were always the same type of sentence. Building something big. Entrepreneur life. Betting on yourself. My father shared those posts on Facebook. Proud father. Future CEO. My son is doing incredible things in New York. Not once in those posts did he mention me. Not once did anyone ask. Hannah Brooks noticed something about me during that first month at the studio. We were working late one evening preparing renderings for a restaurant renovation project in Bellevue. Everyone else had already left. The office was quiet except for the low hum of computers. Hannah leaned against the edge of the drafting table watching me adjust lighting layers on a rendering. "You're running from something," she said. I kept working. "Am I?" "Yeah," she said. "Most people at your age are trying to find something. You're trying to outrun it." I didn't answer. She didn't press. Hannah was the kind of mentor who understood that people reveal things in their own time. After a moment she nodded toward the screen. "But whatever you're running from," she said, "keep running. It's making you very good at this." By the beginning of year 3, my life looked nothing like it had the day I left home. I was 21. Working 20 hours a week at Hannah's studio. Taking a full course load at the University of Washington. And living in a tiny studio apartment in Fremont. 400 square feet. One narrow window. A kitchenette that could barely fit a microwave. But it was mine. I pushed my drafting table right up against the window so the morning light hit the surface when I worked. The walls were covered with sketches. Mood boards. Fabric samples. Color studies. It looked like the apartment of someone building something. Because that's exactly what I was doing. That was also the year my father suddenly decided I needed to come home. The call came through my mother, of course. Karen Carter never delivered difficult news directly. She softened it first. Leah, your father was wondering if you could come home for Thanksgiving this year. Her voice was careful. Too careful. Why? I asked. Well, the Johnsons will be there. And a few people from your father's company. Translation. People had started asking questions. Where was Leah? Why hadn't anyone seen her in 2 years? In my father's world, unanswered questions were dangerous. Appearances mattered. And a daughter who vanished from the family narrative created cracks in the story. I have plans, I said. A pause. Then the phone shifted hands. My father's voice came through the line, sharp and immediate. You're embarrassing this family. There it was. Not. Are you safe? Are you doing okay? Just reputation. People are asking where you are, he continued. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. What truth? That you gave my college fund to Ryan. Silence. Then his voice hardened. Don't be dramatic, Leah. That money was an investment in this family's future. It was my future. You've landed on your feet, he snapped. You're fine. Fine. The word sat between us like something rotten. I'm not coming home, I said. You made a decision 3 years ago. So did I. He hung up. A week later, my Aunt Melissa forwarded me an email. Subject line. Family update. The sender was my father. He had emailed every aunt, uncle, cousin, and extended relative. The message was short. Leah has chosen to distance herself from the family while she works through some personal issues. We continue to support her and hope she finds her way back soon. Personal issues. That phrase does a lot of quiet work in families. It allows people to imagine whatever version of the story they want. Drugs. Mental health. Bad relationships. Irresponsibility. Anything except the truth. Within days, I started receiving messages. Thinking of you. Praying for you. You can always come home. Most of them assumed I had made a mistake. That I had failed somehow. That my father was patiently waiting for me to recover from it. Only one person asked questions. My Aunt Melissa called me directly. Leah, she said gently, what actually happened? Ask Dad what he did with my college fund, I replied. She went quiet. The quiet of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew. Later she told me she had asked him. His answer was exactly what I expected. That's between me and my children. Which is what people say when the truth makes them look bad. After that, the phone calls stopped. Not because people believed me. Because most families prefer comfort over confrontation. I didn't fight the narrative. I didn't defend myself. I was too busy building something that mattered more. But I did save the email. My father's message. The full recipient list. The timestamp. Because one thing had become very clear. A man willing to rewrite history once will do it again. And when that happens, receipts matter. Ryan called me for the first time in nearly 3 years one Thursday evening. His voice was cheerful. Casual. Like nothing had ever happened. Hey Leah. Ryan. Dad told me about the Thanksgiving thing, he said. You're being kind of dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. Ryan, I said slowly. You took $175,000 that belonged to me. Well, technically. No, I said. No, technically. He sighed. Look, families move money around sometimes. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. My education. My future. My grandmother's savings. Reduced to a financial footnote. You always land on your feet, he continued. You're scrappy like that. Scrappy. The word people use when they want to compliment your suffering while benefiting from it. I stayed quiet. Ryan's tone shifted slightly. Just don't start spreading this story around, he added. Dad's reputation matters. There it was. The real reason for the call. If people hear the wrong version of things, it could hurt him. Wrong version? Yeah. Like you saying he stole money. The room went very still. Ryan, I said calmly. I'm going to say this once. Don't call me again unless it's to apologize. He laughed. Not kindly, but nervously. Then I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly when I set the phone down. But my voice had been steady. And that mattered more. That was the last time I spoke to my brother for 2 years and 4 months. Until the day he walked into my office. By the end of year 3, I had been running at full speed for almost 30 months. Classes. Studio work. Freelance design projects on weekends. Coffee shop shifts when money got tight. Sleep was something that happened when my body forced it to. And then, within 1 week, 2 things happened that almost ended everything. The first was an email from my largest freelance client. A boutique hotel group in Portland I had been designing concept interiors for. The message was short. Due to economic uncertainty, they were freezing all external marketing and design contracts effective immediately. Translation: my $1,600 monthly freelance income was gone. Just like that. The second thing arrived 2 days later. My tuition bill for the final semester at the University of Washington. $4,480 due within 30 days. My scholarship covered the rest of my education. But that last payment was mine to handle. I opened my banking app. $743. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Safeway on Fremont Avenue staring at the number like it might change if I refreshed the screen enough times. It didn't. I pulled a receipt from the cup holder and started doing the math. Rent. Utilities. Food. Gas. Every version of the numbers ended the same way. Short. If I couldn't pay that tuition bill, I wouldn't finish the semester. If I didn't finish the semester, I wouldn't graduate. 3 years of work. Gone. For the first time in years, my father's voice appeared in my head. Not a memory. A verdict. Maybe he was right. Maybe the girl who draws rooms really didn't have real potential. Maybe the trade he told me to learn should have been something simpler. Something smaller. Something safe. I picked up my phone and scrolled to where the contact labeled home used to be. I had deleted it years earlier. But I still knew the number. My thumb hovered over the keypad. All I had to do was call. My father would answer. He would say something like, "I told you this would happen." And then he would offer help. With conditions. With control. With the quiet understanding that I had come back. I looked at the passenger seat. My grandmother's wooden upholstery kit sat there. I carried it in the car most days. Like a lucky charm. Inside the box was the measuring tape she had used for decades. I picked it up. The numbers were faded from years of use. Your hands and your head. Nobody can repossess those. I set the tape down. And I did something else. I called Hannah Brooks. She answered on the first ring. It was nearly midnight. But Hannah was the type of person who never slept normal hours. "Leah," she said. "You okay?" "I need to ask you something," I said. I kept my voice steady. "Do you have any overflow projects?" "Anything at all." "I'll take whatever you've got." There was a pause. Then Hannah said something that changed the entire direction of my life. "Actually, I was planning to talk to you tomorrow." My stomach tightened. The last thing I needed was bad news. "I'm leaving the firm," she continued. My heart sank. The one stable professional anchor in my life was disappearing. But then she kept talking. I'm starting my own studio. I blinked. Residential and commercial design. She exhaled slowly. And I need someone full-time. A junior designer. The Safeway parking lot was completely silent around me. Cars parked under yellow lights. Rain tapping lightly on the windshield. How much does it pay? I asked. Enough for you to finish school. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes. Not because I was breaking down. Because for the first time that night, the math worked. Hannah, I said slowly. Why me? She laughed softly. Because I saw the Morrison project you submitted last month. The Morrison project was a hotel lobby redesign concept I had done as a class assignment. You think that's junior-level work? She asked. No, she said before I could answer. That's principal designer work. You just don't know it yet. She didn't offer charity. She offered a job. A real one. Full-time. Salary. Health insurance. I started the following Monday. Studio work during the day. Classes 3 evenings a week. Weekends finishing assignments. Sleep became a luxury. But that year was the turning point. Late that fall my Aunt Melissa called. Her voice sounded tired. Leah, she said gently. Ryan moved back home. I leaned back in my desk chair. What happened? The startup collapsed. Apparently Ryan's consulting firm had never really existed. It had been networking events, investor lunches, and a co-working desk he could barely afford. The BMW had been repossessed. The Manhattan apartment lease had ended early. He returned to Tacoma with almost nothing. My father responded the only way he knew how. He refinanced the house, pulled money from his retirement accounts, and gave Ryan another $40,000 to start over. My mother, who hadn't worked since Ryan was born, took a job as a cashier at a grocery store. Does Dad ever mention me? I asked. Melissa hesitated. No. Of course he didn't. In my father's story, I no longer existed. That night I stayed late at the studio finishing renderings for a restaurant project. Outside the office windows the Seattle skyline reflected across the water. Inside the studio the lights were warm. Computers humming. Design boards stacked along the wall. I looked around and realized something. My father had invested everything in Ryan. And Ryan had burned it. Meanwhile the girl who was supposed to learn a trade had quietly been building one. 2 months later Hannah asked me to stay after work. We sat in the studio conference room with sketches spread across the table. I want to do something, she said. Something bigger. She slid a document toward me. Partnership proposal. Brooks & Carter Design Studio. 51% Hannah. 49% me. I stared at the paper. You're serious? Very. You've been carrying half this company for 2 years already, she said. You might as well have your name on the door. We signed the partnership agreement the following Tuesday. 6 months later we hired our 4th employee. Then our 7th. Then our 12th. By the beginning of year 5, the company had grown far beyond what either of us expected. And my last name was on the door of a building my father had never seen. Year 5 looked nothing like the life anyone in that house on Willow Ridge Drive had imagined for me. I was 24. Brooks & Carter Design Studio had grown faster than either Hannah or I expected. What started as a 2-person operation in a small office in Fremont had expanded into a full design firm occupying the 18th floor of a renovated glass tower in downtown Seattle. 40 employees. Architects. Interior designers. Project managers. A materials lab. 2 conference suites. And an open-plan studio filled with drafting tables, iMacs, and shelves stacked with fabric samples and architectural models. The kind of office space my father would have described as impressive if it belonged to someone he admired. My office sat in the corner. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing Elliott Bay. On the desk were only two personal things. A framed photo of my grandmother Evelyn. And her wooden upholstery kit. The same box I had carried out of my childhood home 5 years earlier. No photos of my parents. None of Ryan. Just the woman who had believed in me when no one else did. The first time I saw the company name etched into the glass door, Brooks and Carter Design Studio, I stood there longer than I should have. Not admiring it. Trying to believe it. Then in early January something unexpected happened. I received an email from Seattle Business Monthly. They were launching their annual 30 Under 30 feature highlighting young entrepreneurs and professionals across Washington state. Someone had nominated me. The email asked if I would accept the nomination. I read the message 3 times before forwarding it to Hannah. Her response came back 2 minutes later. Are you kidding? Of course you're accepting. The award ceremony was scheduled for early March at the Seattle Convention Center. 300 attendees. Press coverage. Industry networking. The kind of event my father would have proudly framed in the living room if Ryan had been invited. I accepted the nomination. Then I started writing a short speech. Nothing dramatic. Just thank the people who helped me get there. Hannah. My professors. My grandmother. But there was one part one kept rewriting. The line about the beginning. The truth about the moment someone told me I didn't have potential. How much should I say? How close to the bone should I cut without making it about him? I hadn't decided yet. What I didn't realize was that the nomination profiles would be published online 2 weeks before the ceremony. With full names, photos, company information, and a short biography. Lakewood, Washington is only about 45 minutes from downtown Seattle. And the internet has a way of shrinking distance. It was my parents' old neighbor who saw it first. Mark Jensen. He had lived 2 houses down from us when I was growing up. His son had played basketball with Ryan in high school. Mark now worked in commercial real estate in Seattle. He was scrolling through the article during lunch when he stopped. The photo. The name. Leah Carter. Co-founder, Brooks and Carter Design Studio. He forwarded the article to his wife. She forwarded it to my mother. With a message that said, "Is this your Leah?" I learned the rest later from my Aunt Melissa. My father opened the article on his tablet that evening while sitting at the kitchen counter. The same counter where he had signed away my college fund 5 years earlier. He read the profile silently. My education. My company. Our client list. 40 employees. Revenue growth. The award nomination. There was a quote from Hannah calling me one of the most naturally gifted spatial designers I've worked with in 20 years. When he finished reading, my father didn't say congratulations. He didn't say he was proud. He didn't even say my name. He looked at my mother and said one sentence. She got lucky. My mother didn't answer. That surprised him. Apparently she just stood there for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Daniel, she built that without a dollar from us." My father closed the tablet. Then he walked out of the room. Upstairs Ryan had seen the article too. He was 26. Living in his old bedroom. Surrounded by rejection emails and credit card statements. According to Melissa, Ryan stared at the article for a long time. Then he went downstairs and said the most honest thing he had said in years. "We should go talk to her." My father's first reaction was immediate. No. He wasn't going to show up at his daughter's office asking for anything. That would require acknowledging she had succeeded without him. But Ryan knew exactly how to frame it. "Dad," he said. "If people find out she's this successful and we're not even in contact." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Reputation. Optics. Image. Those were the currencies my father understood best. Ryan had found the lever. Within 2 days they decided to drive to Seattle. No phone call. No warning. Just show up. My father would walk into the office. Shake hands. Maybe take a photo. Repair the narrative. Proof that the Carter family was united. 3 people got into the car that Tuesday morning. My father in his best suit. The navy one he had owned for nearly 15 years. Ryan in wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt. And my mother in the back seat clutching her purse. They drove north on Interstate 5 toward a building they had never been invited to. That same Tuesday morning I arrived at the office around 8. The floor was quiet. Most of the staff arrived closer to 9. The Seattle skyline was still gray with early morning fog. I sat at my desk reviewing the speech draft for the ceremony that Saturday. The part thanking my grandmother was finished. I want to thank the woman who gave me my first investment, $15,000 in a wooden toolbox, and taught me that real potential isn't something someone else gets to decide. That line felt right. What came after it still didn't. I leaned back in my chair looking out the window. For the first time in years I realized something strange. I hadn't thought about my father in weeks. That, more than anything else, felt like victory. The intercom buzzed. Leah? It was Claire, our receptionist. Her voice sounded uncertain. Yes? There are 3 people in the lobby asking to see you. They don't have an appointment. Who are they? She hesitated. They said their family. My hand stopped moving on the keyboard. 5 years. No calls. No letters. No apologies. And now they were standing in the lobby of my company. The past had just walked through the front door. I sat there for a moment staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. Then I picked up the phone. Send them up, I said. And I waited for the elevator doors to open. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that carried faintly through the glass wall of my office. I didn't go out to meet them. I stayed exactly where I was. From my desk I could see the reception area across the studio floor. Claire stepped away from her desk and walked toward the elevator just as the doors slid open. 3 figures stepped out. My father first. Daniel Carter. Still tall. Still rigid. But the navy suit he wore looked older than I remembered. The shoulders pulled too tightly across his back, and the fabric had that slightly dull sheen clothes get when they've been dry cleaned too many times. Behind him came Ryan. Wrinkled khakis. A faded polo shirt. His hair thinner than it had been 5 years earlier. The easy confidence he used to carry was gone, replaced by something restless. My mother stepped out last. Karen Carter looked smaller than I remembered. She held her purse with both hands the way people hold something when they aren't sure where to put them. Claire said something polite and began guiding them across the studio. 40 people were already working that morning. Designers adjusting renderings. Project managers reviewing material boards. Phones ringing. Keyboards tapping. The quiet hum of a company in motion. None of those 40 people knew the 3 strangers walking through the space. They didn't look up. Because here, my family had no authority. Claire opened the glass conference room door and gestured inside. Ms. Carter will be with you shortly. I gave them 2 minutes. Not out of pettiness. I just needed to breathe. Then I stood up, straightened my blazer, picked up a legal pad and pen, and walked across the studio floor. When I stepped into the conference room, my mother saw me first. Her breath caught. Not a word. Just a small sound of recognition. Her knees wavered slightly, and she grabbed the edge of the walnut table to steady herself. My father didn't move. But his eyes scanned the room. The glass walls. The skyline. The company logo etched into the far wall. Brooks and Carter Design Studio. The expression on his face was something I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was calculation colliding with reality. Ryan just stared at me. His mouth opened slightly. Closed again. No words came out. I took the chair at the far end of the table and set my notepad down. "Please," I said calmly. "Have a seat." They sat. My father instinctively chose the head of the table. Then seemed to realize this wasn't his table. He shifted awkwardly to the side. My mother sat near the door. Ryan sat between them. "Can I get you coffee or water?" I asked. No one answered. My father cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself," he said. The same tone he used to use when reviewing Ryan's report cards. Evaluative. Measured. "I always said you were resourceful." Resourceful. Not talented. Not capable. Just resourceful. I let the silence linger for 3 seconds. Then I nodded once. "Thank you." I folded my hands on the table. "How can I help you today?" My father blinked. He hadn't expected that. He had expected warmth. Emotion. Maybe gratitude. Instead, he got a conference room and a professional question. "We're here because we're family," he said. "We've let too much time pass." My mother nodded quickly, eyes already shining with tears. Ryan leaned forward. "Tori." "Leah," I corrected calmly. He shifted in his seat. "Right. Leah." He forced a smile. "I've been working on a few business ideas," he said. "I was hoping maybe you could look at them. Give me your perspective." I studied him for a moment. Then I asked a simple question. "Ryan, are you a client?" He frowned. "What?" "If this is a business consultation," I said, sliding a card across the table, "Claire can schedule you. Our rate is $350 an hour." The room went completely still. My father's jaw tightened. Ryan stared at the card like it might explode. "You're serious," he said. "Very." My father leaned forward. "Enough of this corporate act, Leah." His voice carried the familiar edge from my childhood. "We're your parents." "You drove 2 hours to see me," he added. I nodded. "That's more effort than you made in 5 years." His face flushed. "I made a decision for this family." "Yes," I said calmly. "You did. You took $175,000 from my college fund and transferred it to Ryan." His mouth opened. Then closed again. "That was a legal violation of your fiduciary duty as a UTMA custodian," I continued. My father froze. "Excuse me?" I spoke with a lawyer. Silence. My mother's head turned sharply toward him. "Daniel, what is she talking about?" He didn't answer. Ryan leaned forward quickly. "Leah, look, I'm in a tough spot right now," he said. "I've got about 60 grand in credit card debt. If you could just help me out." "No." The word landed quietly. But it carried weight. Ryan blinked. "Come on. We're family." "Family didn't stop you from taking my future," I replied. My father's voice rose slightly. "You turned out fine." "Yes," I said. "I did. And I did it without you." The words hung in the air. My mother finally spoke through tears. "I should have said something," she whispered. I stood there and let it happen. I looked at her gently. "You were the adult. I was 18. She covered her mouth and cried quietly. For a moment no one spoke. Then I stood up. Not dramatically. Just the way someone stands when a meeting has ended. "I don't hate you," I said. "Hating you would mean you still control how I feel." I picked up my notepad. "If there is ever going to be a relationship between us, It starts with three things: an apology, accountability, and respect. Until then, Claire will show you out. My father stood slowly. For once, he had nothing to say. Ryan stared at the floor. My mother looked at me one last time. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she whispered. I know, I said softly. They walked out. Through the studio. Past 40 employees who didn't know them. Into the elevator. And when the doors closed, I allowed myself to think something I had refused to say for 5 years. I won. Not because of money. Not because of the office. But because I built a life no one could take from me. A month later, my mother sent a letter. She had filed for divorce. She moved into a small apartment and started working again. My father retired early. Ryan works at a car dealership now. He still hasn't apologized. And me? I'm still here. Still building. Still designing spaces. Still keeping my grandmother's wooden toolbox on my desk. If this story stayed with you, take a second to subscribe to Women Reddit Stories so you don't miss the next one. And if you've ever been the person someone counted out, remember something my grandmother once told me. Your hands and your head are the only things nobody can repossess.